All right, start recording in three, two, and one. All right, and welcome back to the Reserve Squad Midweek Show, a soccer podcast covering all things in the EPL from a bench perspective. And I was away a little bit for the festive fixtures, and just to kind of recap where I last left off, because I was talking about Chelsea a little bit the last time, as they were the team that was pushing Liverpool. I did try to hedge and say that I still believed Arsenal was going to be probably the closest as far as being real challengers, but I did spend last podcast really talking up Chelsea, and I've looked a little foolish since then because Chelsea have hit a little bit of a rut, but I think I looked into some of the things that Enzo Maresca, that the coach, has said, and he's really talked up how the energy levels have dipped a little bit. There have been a lot of games in December, and it's possible, something like that, happened. They had some suspensions, I believe, that maybe affected them a little bit. They're starting to get injuries at the back as well, and so we're kind of just going to go over a little bit what's happened. How has this table changed since I last did a show? And there's still time for a lot of this to still change because we're not done with the festive fixtures yet. There's still I still like I think next Wednesday or Thursday. There's still a bunch of midweek things planned before we get to the FA Cup games, and I think the first round of the Carabao semifinals are also in the cards this month. So still a lot of ways for a lot of games to affect these squads. But we get started with Liverpool, and they are at top place with 45 points. Then behind them now is Arsenal. Now Liverpool do have a couple games in hand, but Arsenal will have a chance to really make this interesting if they can win their game this Saturday versus Brighton to put a little pressure at least before Liverpool play their next game. Again, Liverpool will have two or maybe even three games in hand at that point, but it doesn't really matter. It's all about just trying to apply a little pressure as you can. Now, when I get to Arsenal, a couple of things have happened to them since I last did a show. For one, Bukayo Saka has unfortunately maybe played his last game for them. If not this season, probably until the very end of the season. And if Arsenal is smart, they won't rush him back. Something that I've been speaking about for a while now is I have been worried about the minutes that Arteta has put on his legs, because it hasn't just been running him to the ground in the league. Soccer has been playing every game for them in Europa League or in Champions League, and it's not like he got a reprieve with England either. And you just there's a minutes charge for you, what you want to pay attention to, especially for players that are under 24. And for the most part, it's been really accurate when it comes to just predicting future injuries. And Saka's up there, Foden, it was up there as well. And it really is unfortunate that it finally did kind of show itself a little bit. But in some ways, Arsenal have been able to win the couple of these games since that's happened by tweaking some things around. And it really is a shame that it's come a little bit at Saka's expense. But we saw Yeri get a start finally. Played with Odegaard. And he had a cross that actually led to I think the third goal for them. We saw Martinelli playing, I believe, versus Ipswich, where he did a cross with his right foot that I don't think Saka would have played. That actually I think led to their goal versus Ipswich. I thought Arsenal were actually quite good in their game versus Crystal Palace, uh, where Arteta also did a different tweak. He rested Declan Rice. We'll basically call it that. We won't necessarily bench, but it's possible he was actually benched. Uh, the midfield was Thomas Partey. I think it was Kai Havertz, and then it was Odegaard. And so basically it was finally a little signal that Arteta had sent out, that he was tired of this kind of safe, playing so many defensive-minded players versus teams that are going to sit very deep against you. And you saw the little bit of the way how Jesus and Kai Havertz can still work together. They really have missed Gabriel Jesus, and he's been one of the keys to a little of this revival that we've seen after Arsenal win a couple of games where they weren't able to score in open play, and they're still very good in set pieces as they showed versus Brentford. So what I'm going to do is kind of just go over the table. I'm not going to be able to go over every game that's happened. Uh, but I am going to go over basically why the top four is the way it is, and go over all of those games that happened to shape the top four, and then maybe talk a little bit about where the relegation table is, because it's starting to look more and more concrete. Though that said, there are a lot of teams that aren't that far away from safety. I think as I'm looking at the table now, uh, let's see, we have Everton and Wolves on 17 and 16 points. Ipswich is on 15 right now. So that, I mean, that's just one game where this can all change. Crystal Palace on 20. I think they're probably safe. It's not, it's only 5 points away, so they could still get dragged down into this. Man United on 22 points is very interesting. I don't think they're in a relegation fight, but man, I don't want to spend a whole episode, kind of talking about them, but they look they look so lost, and now they're about to play Liverpool, and I don't want to say something where I'll eat my words, but the years of bad recruitment, the years of bringing in managers to try to keep what they had going, it's finally showing up. And one thing that I will spend a little time talking about them is they brought in a guy that is entirely different than what they've had for the last 2 or 3, maybe 5 or even 6 years. Is they finally have a guy that is very structured, where they haven't had structure for forever. They brought in a guy that is almost rigid in his structure, and he doesn't want to change it. And the problem that Man United are having now is they don't have players that can suit this at all, and so it's very square pegs in the round holes kind of situation, and it's going to take. I do think they'll be fine, but it is going to take some serious rebuilding. And you hear the way that they're talking, the way that the ownership is coming. Ineos, I guess Jim Ratcliffe has come in, and he's making all these cuts to charities. There's something that apparently was made for former players that maybe are struggling. He's cut funds to that. He's been cutting office Christmas parties to hardworking staff, because you don't really think about it, but it's a lot of pressure on just the club staff to get that Boxing Day fixture, especially if you have like a home game or not. So that which usually that's not really for the players. That's for like the everyone else that is working or involved with the club. And apparently he cut funds for that as well. He's just looking ways to make cuts everywhere he is, and he's already come out and made statements that they don't really have funds to really spend a whole lot this past summer, or this coming transfer window. We will see what they do in the summertime, but it does feel like they've got to do a lot of player sales to maybe raise some funds. And you look at who they have as far as that goes, and it just feels whoever they sell, they're going to have to eat a massive cut. And looking back at the past summer window, it doesn't necessarily look to be that great. Though that you can say that was supposed to be for Ten Hag and his system, and you brought in someone that is entirely different. So I think that's where someone like a Joshua Xerxes maybe could have fitted in what Ten Hag wanted to do, where now you look at Xerxes and he doesn't fit at all. And unfortunately for him, he became a little bit of the face for Man United's fans, kind of disappointment a little bit, which I'll get to as well. So going back to the table, we have Liverpool, then Arsenal, and then Nottingham Forest. Nottingham Forest are still there in third. They were actually second before the Arsenal and Brentford game on 37 points, and then you have Chelsea still not out of it on 35 points, and then you have Newcastle at 32. Newcastle have not really had the best of seasons, yet they've hit some kind of switch where they've been scoring goals for fun. They got Isak back. They started to play a Tonali, Bruno Guimaraes, and Joe Linton midfield. And I think the last game that they lost probably was to Brentford, maybe early November, where that was right after the Liverpool game, where it looked like they just didn't have they didn't have a lot of energy. I don't even think Anthony Gordon started that game, and that's been another thing too. They found a kind of a more consistent kind of front three that I think balances them out a little bit more in Gordon, Isak, and Jacob Murphy. Jacob Murphy isn't necessarily the flashy name, the star. He's not gonna wow you with a lot of goals and assists. You think, but what he does is he balances them. One, he's got a right foot and he's not afraid to stay wide. Two, he's very good at actually looking to send very dangerous balls into Isak, and he's a willing runner. And he does well. He does good work defensively. So you've got a front three that is starting to click a little bit. You've got a midfield three that is it's very well balanced, to be honest, with Bruno and Joe Linton. You've got ball winners there. You've got people that can ball carry. You got people that can see Isaac making a run or Gordon making a run ahead. You've got attackers that are willing to run it without the ball. You don't have people just going to feet. You have people making runs in behind, uh, creating spaces, and you also have Tonali. Now it's not just you can't just focus on Bruno anymore. You've now they've Newcastle has started to really trust, or Eddie Howe has started to really trust Tonali, and he's kind of been a little of that revive for them as well. And the other thing too is Lewis Hall has been an unbelievable kind of a quiet signing when they brought him in. I think they brought him in even last season, and they just didn't always necessarily play him. I think he was a loan on Chelsea, and now they finally made it official. And Chelsea maybe are looking at this, and they have Mark Cucurella, but maybe they're a little bit regretting this because I think this. I don't even think this is a. Uh, this is a that far out of a prediction. I think we're looking at England's next left back for a very long time in Lewis Hall. He can drop deep. He can do the build up stuff. Very comfortable with the ball at his feet. But he can also make some runs, and he's got a great delivery on him. And he destroyed Man United with the kind of runs and crosses. And it's not just that game. Newcastle, I think it was Ipswich or I don't know. Newcastle have been scoring goals for fun in all the games that they've been playing. Actually, with Man United, they only scored two. It felt like they could have scored six in that opening 30 minutes. Uh, they've been scoring goals for fun. Isak's been scoring goals for fun, but I think it was Leicester. There's been a kind of a new kind of s- some kind of form of life basically in Anthony Gordon all of a sudden because him and Lewis Hall are really working off each other. Now you see Lewis Hall being way higher up than maybe someone like a Dan Burn if he was playing in that position would have been instead, or Lloyd Kelly. Lewis Hall is offering them so many different options when they go forward. He hasn't been necessarily bad defensively either, and it seems what they've done is they've instead of doing what they were doing with Trippier, they've now given that role to Lewis Hall, and Trippier is now the one kind of staying back. So they're still kind of in a little bit of a back three, makeshift as far as the rest defense, as you say. Uh, but Newcastle are slowly moving up, and the only thing I'm going to say about them is, I think I said it after the Liverpool game that Newcastle played is to me this is a Champions League team, and the only thing that's maybe holding them back is Eddie Howe loves pressing high. He likes having guys playing high without the ball. And you think about it, the weakness is still Dan Burn and Fabian Schär. And if they could find a way, now they possibly could get Sven Botman back. I think they said this month if they can get him back and he doesn't have injury issues. Now he's been out for I don't know almost 2 seasons now. It's not easy to recover necessarily from that, but we have seen some people that can recover. Uh, we'll have to see, but it just feels like they are a center back away from really being good, and not just pushing top four, maybe pushing for a little bit more. That said, the depth isn't necessarily great, and if they did have to play a whole lot of weeks, a whole lot of with 2 games in a week kind of schedule. That is where you look at this, and it could maybe trouble them. Also, they had to sell a lot this past summer because of PSR issues. So I mean, it's possible they could have even had someone like an Elliot Anderson or Yakuba Menta to have them as bench options, and they've been struggling a little bit with bench options. But that starting 11 is quite good, bar the 2 center backs. So Newcastle's right there, and notice I'm at fifth, and I haven't said Man City yet. So Man City at sixth on 31 points, and then Bournemouth on 30, Fulham 29, Aston Villa on 29, and then we have Brighton on 27, Spurs on 24. So Spurs are out of the top 10 right now. 11 points off the top four, and then you have Brentford at 24 points, tied with Spurs. I don't think many people would have expected that. And then you have West Ham at 23, and West Ham have been absolutely atrocious for a lot of the season. A lot of people want Lopetegui to go. I don't necessarily know if I have a whole lot of thoughts on that. I don't. I definitely don't think it's worked and you look at the Nicholas Fulkrug signing. If going back in the summer, you kind of look at a little bit at what their summer was because they did spend a lot of money. But Nicholas Fulkrug, they aren't really playing him, and they're not playing him even with Mikel Antonio being out injured. They they haven't really trusted Somerville either or Lucas Guilherme. This kind of 18-year-old, supposed to be a wonder kid from Brazil, but they haven't really trusted him either. And you look back at that window, and maybe it wasn't necessarily as good. Now they spent a lot of money, so that return isn't necessarily that great. Max Kelman has his days, and then doesn't Todibo kind of likewise, and it just feels very. But the midfield itself is a wreck. West Ham played Liverpool, and they were. I guess the day of Boxing Day, or maybe I think it was maybe like the day of before New Year's, where this was Liverpool basically probably could have gotten whatever they wanted. That midfield of I think it was Paqueta and it was Solar and maybe Suchek does not work at all. They've got, or maybe it was Alvarez. They've got no way to really kind of there's no cohesion there, and I do think they're struggling a little bit there. In the beginning, I think it was Rodriguez that was playing for them, but so the midfield really is a mess, and you'd look at it. It is kind of unfortunate if you're a West Ham fan because the front line should have goals in them, and other than Bowen and Kudus, you don't really see where the creation is. To be honest, but Paqueta has had a very off and on kind of start to their season. But it's funny because everyone has been crying out that Lopetegui's got to go. You got to get someone else in. This is relegation fodder, and then they're in front of Man United in the table, at least, as we enter 2025. And then you have Man United on 22 points, and then Crystal Palace, Everton, and Wolves. Wolves are the team that is safe at the minute on 16 points, and they've had a pretty good Christmas or festive fixture list themselves. As I think they sacked Gary O'Neill, and they brought in I think it was Mito Pereira, who I didn't really know much about. Doesn't really seem like he's changed a ton, but they have started to get results. Now, one thing he has done is he's changed a little bit. He hasn't changed necessarily the structure, but he's changed a little bit of the personnel, which maybe I'll get to or not. One thing. I think Gary O'Neill was trying to place Semedo as one of the center backs, and that just was not working. So what he's done is I think he's made Matt Dougherty one of the center backs, and I think it's changed Semedo to be a little bit more kind of a bombing fullback or wing back, a little higher up, which has helped them a little bit. Mateus Cunha continues to score some pretty big goals for them as well, and then so I think Wolves. What are they, like 2 or 3, maybe unbeaten now in a row, including a pretty big point versus Spurs recently. This past weekend where I, Spurs are just a complete unknown at the minute, and I'll get to them as well. Now they have a lot of injuries at the back. They're playing a kid, Norchi Gray, who's not really a center back. It's starting to show up a little bit, like actually a lot. Also, the keeper. I think I spoke about Foster's kind of errors. The last time I did a show, and yeah, maybe he could have done a little bit better on the Larson goal, but. So they went to the Spurs Stadium and left 2-2. They left with something. Yeah, they beat Man United, I think, on Christmas Day or the day or Boxing Day, and I think even before that maybe they got a draw. So they're getting results or they're getting performances. Not the performance. They're getting results in ways they weren't getting with Gary O'Neill. So maybe that change was the right call. Still a lot to see about that. But we have also seen a couple people for Wolves be trusted that Gary O'Neill wasn't really trusting. We've seen Wang come in. I think Wang actually got one of the goals for Spurs. For some reason, Wang was back fit and he wasn't really seeing a lot of game time. We weren't seeing Rodrigo Gomez or Guedes get starts, and I think at least one of them got a start versus Man United. So it again, that was one of the more kind of the questionable decisions that Gary Neal was doing, and he also was not doing the best when it came to structuring a back line to save his life, and we'll see if Wolves have enough. You look at the squad, they 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 have goals in them, but they have really nothing behind them if they do have an injury to say Cunha. They're doing this without Mario Lamena, and one of the guys that's come in has been Andre, and Andre And Yao Gomez, as a a midfield too, hasn't looked that terrible either. At least I didn't think they were that bad versus Man United. Apparently, Andre maybe got an injury versus Spurs. And then you have Everton just right there at safety. You figured Sean Dyche is going to find a way. Everton had a very weird Christmas or period where they went 3 games unbeaten, and they 3 games were versus Arsenal, versus Chelsea, and versus Man City. And normally you would be like, "This is fantastic," but they worked very hard in those 3 games, and they only got 3 points total. Three basically draws, 2 clean sheets, and they scored. They drew 1-1 with Man City. Uh, there was some positive though. Ilian Ndiaye that they got from Marseille has really started to show up and shown up in a time when they have desperately needed it. They got Jared Braithwaite back, and Braithwaite and Tarkowski are pretty good center back pairing when they are able to play together. And then Pickford's always good for saving his side. Loads of goals that they should have conceded otherwise. And Pickford had really good games versus Chelsea and versus Man City. And so that the Man City game, they gave away a PK. That game easily could have gone the other way. And then you look at what just happened this past weekend when basically they went up against kind of a mirror image of themselves in some respects in Nuno Espirito Santo with Nottingham Forest. And you just see a team that is a little bit better at basically playing the Sean Dyche kind of game plan. And you saw an Everton team that wasn't able to keep a clean sheet, and because after that they weren't able to score either. And so Everton are a very weird team to me, because I look at Seamus Coleman, I look at Ashley Young back there for fullbacks, and I just think, can you go a whole season actually surviving on that? I'm not really sure you can. Now, they're doing a lot of this without Dwight McNeil as well. You get him back, maybe you can get a little bit more creation. You don't have to just rely on Ilian Ndiaye. In a lot of these games, Calvert-Lewin was making some runs, but wasn't necessarily able to score in any of them. And there were a couple of games when actually it was Beto that was played instead, or even Armando Broja was played instead. So Everton, to me, are the real wild card in all of this when you look at it. West Ham should be able to stay up, but the West Ham was so bad defensively, and the midfield is really, really dire. I think Crystal Palace are fine. Wolves and Everton, to me, are probably the two that you now. It's easy to say that when you look at the table, and they're the two that are staying up. Ipswich Town and Leicester City are only a couple points away. And Leicester City has hired Ruud van Nistelrooy. He got a wake up call versus I believe it was Newcastle, where they had thumped him like 4-0 before it was even uh, the 60-minute mark. But Leicester City, and Leicester City, you look at the back line, that possibly is what's going to ultimately do it. Because I don't know how much Van Nistelrooy can get out of Connor Cody and Vestergaard, because they played very, very good versus Man City. I thought they actually did a pretty good job of defending versus Liverpool for the most part, but it's just they're going to give away a lot of chances against them, just because of that back line being so dire. You look around them; they've got a lot of good pieces, though. El Canus was very, very strong on the ball. Harry Winks probably had his best game of the season versus Man City. Vardy is Vardy, and Vardy probably could have done a little bit better versus Man City in a couple of those moments when he was actually playing the ball into the box and just had uncharacteristic misses, you could say. Ipswich Town are a very weird team as well. They're only a couple points out. I think they were only 1 point actually from being in safety. And you look at what they've been able to do. They played Arsenal, tough. I guess you can say Arsenal allowed them to actually have majority of the ball in the second half, but they didn't put any numbers forward. And I made a little bit of a tweet storm, kind of being upset a little bit at uh, how Ipswich weren't really trying to go forward, or just they were trying to get a respectable kind of just a 1-0 kind of defeat. In that respect, I figured if you play this way, you are going to get down, but maybe you'll go down respectably. You can say, and instead they turned around and played Chelsea a couple of days after that, and they won 2-0. Could have been a little bit more. I mean, the Delap just was having his way with the Chelsea back line. It's still necessarily like they're getting a whole lot of numbers forward, but they do have a game changer in Delap. Leicester City have someone like a Vardy, which Wolves are going to rely a little bit on Cunha. So that's kind of how what we're shaping up. And then we have in in last place. We do have Southampton on 6 points. They've also sacked their manager as well, and they're at least being competitive in a number of these games as well. They haven't had the worst Christmas period. I believe they almost got it. They drew in a game, I think, on Boxing Day, and then they nearly drew versus Crystal Palace, but they ended up conceding a little bit late to lose, I think 2-1. Um, better performances, but at the same time, they also have issues at the back. Kyle Walker Peters can create a little bit for them. Tyler Dibling as well. You don't really see what they have as far as forward options, whether or not it's Adam Armstrong or uh, or Cam Archer or even Paul Owenacho. It's just it does feel like it's a team that just isn't built to stay up, and that is kind of where we are. But one thing to kind of talk about, I guess I'll lead a little bit with Man United since I already kind of went into it a little bit because what I missed was so they beat Man City, and I do think that required a little bit of Man City kind of blowing up a little bit in the process, and maybe you can that mask a little bit of that performance because I think Man United did not even have a shot registered in that entire first half. But you do see the limitations a little bit of this setup by Ruben Amorim, especially with the kind of players that he has. And versus lower tier sides, it's one thing to do this versus Man City. You play, De Ligt, play Harry Maguire, you play Lisandro Martinez, you play very packed kind of, back three. You play with for your wing backs. You play, two fullbacks, basically two defensive-minded fullbacks. You play Dalot, who's also playing on the wrong side of the field because he can't use his left foot the way you would want him to, and you play Mazurai. And so already you have five defensive-minded players, and then you fit Ngarte in there. He's not going to score a lot of goals for you either, and you're just kind of struggling a little bit for where do you go for creation? How do you advance the ball a little bit? You have Bruno, you have Ahmad. Uh, in the Man City game, you didn't have Rashford or Garnacho. You didn't really have any kind of pace, and you had Diallo and you had Rasmus Højlund. And just the thing that was interesting here is it's one thing to do that versus Man City, but they lined up this exact way versus Wolves. A side that I also set up kind of the same way to play them. And the problem for that is Wolves or have better players to play that system, and I'll get to that. But Man United's festive fixture list, they lose 3-0 to Bournemouth. I think it's a match made in heaven for like a pressing side like Bournemouth to play a United side that could not escape pressure. They had turnovers in the back line and midfield. And again, their wingbacks aren't necessarily great defensively, marking runners or defending 1v1. So that doesn't really help you either. Kepa made a few saves in the first half to at least keep United from scoring. But Bournemouth, and all they do is they create a lot of chaos in the box, and they get into the penalty area a couple of these times, and it leads to 3 goals. Really, there's one that was a PK, a horrid decision by Mazurai. They conceded on a set piece, and that's been another thing that's been very weird. Man United cannot stop teams scoring them on set pieces every single game. It seems that has become a thing. They also do that with Wolves, which we'll get to as well. And then the PK by Mazurai is just absolutely. There's just no reason for him to go to ground, and I think he was maybe even playing at center back that time in a back three, and just it's a horrid decision. He allows Patrick Kluivert to actually go past him, or Justin Kluivert to go past him, and it brings him down from behind, and then Kluivert converts the PK, and then the weird one or the real one to be worried about was the third, because it's Kobe Mainoo losing the ball, and then it's clever play by Evan Nilsson, who's able to show himself. He runs away from the center backs who aren't following. Harry Maguire and De Ligt aren't able to follow him, so he's able to find a little space. He collects the ball with a nice little turn, and then you have Bournemouth that have Kirkes and you have Semenyo both making a run outside, and it's just Mazurai basically is on a 2v1, and the ball is played through. He's not able to mark that, and then basically Bournemouth get to the byline, and it's a nice little cutback cross into the box. That again, a lot of ball watching by Man United center backs, Maguire and De Ligt, and they just allow it to kind of happen. Or maybe only one was playing there, but they allow a cutback cross, 6 yards from goal, and Semenyo basically smashes it into the net, and so that was that game. And then Wolves was entirely something different. Cunha, scores basically from the corner flag, and even before this, you saw some danger. So just for some reason, Man United are really struggling defending corners, and you're playing I think in this game you are playing Delict and Hammer. You're playing with three, center backs. Now, Lisandro Martinez doesn't really count. This should not really be happening. And here, basically, Cunha scores from the corner flag. It's very similar to what Son did a couple of weeks ago uh, in the Carabao quarterfinal. Basically, now that wasn't Onana. That was with a different Man United keeper, but it's the same kind of Olympiaco. I believe is what it's called. But this game was not good. Now you can mask it a little bit because Bruno basically gets himself sent off like the first minute into the second half with a second yellow card. Bruno was getting frustrated. Bruno was losing the ball. Bruno was being a little careless. But you look at him; he does not have any options ahead of him. So I understand him being a little frustrated. You have Rasmus, making runs that are very predictable, and it's very easy to mark versus a team that has a little pace, in their in their back, or just has people that are able to defend a little bit against it. And then you look at what Wolves have, and they have someone like a Mateus Cunha that has a little bit more energy and has a little more pace to him than someone like a Bruno does, and he was basically able to run past Bruno in a number of these times. You have someone like Ait Nori and Semedo that are able to get forward and to get high, where Man United don't necessarily have that, and you saw the limits to what. And Morim can line up with, and someone like Wolves that are playing the exact same system, and Wolves were a better side even before the red card, and the red card kind of just killed the game off as well. And then we get to the Newcastle game, goal from Isak, and then Joe Linton. This all happens in the first 13 minutes. Very similar goals. You have two crosses into the box, one from Gordon, one from Lewis Hall, directed basically at Lisandro Martinez. And he can't do much with Isak, and you can't really do much with Joe Linton. And it felt like they were targeting him, to be honest. And then it's worse than that. Just that first opening, whatever it was, 20 minutes or so, Newcastle had something. I think they said 20 touches in the Man United penalty area. United maybe had one. Newcastle had so much of the ball. The entire ball was living in the Man United just final third, essentially. And then the only surprise is it wasn't 6-0 or 5-0 after 30 minutes. What basically Moore had to change something, and he did. And unfortunately, he brings off Kobe Main. He brings on Kobe Mano to sub off Joshua Xerxes. Xerxes was losing the ball. He wasn't really having the best game, but he wasn't really running much. He was getting played around. But I think it was masking a little bit where Man United were really struggling here because they were playing Casemiro and Eriksson together in a midfield two, and in Newcastle, it felt like always had three or even four people in the same area, and you're just asking them to basically cover like 50 yards of space. The Man United shape was very weird to start this game. Xerxes was you didn't have Bruno and you didn't have Ugarte, and so you understand. Morin was a little bit handcuffed in what he could play, but Kobe Mano had to start this game, and he was subbed off or subbed on after like 25 minutes or so. Man United somewhat made it respectable after that, but by then it was too little, too late. And respectable means competitive. It's not like anyone ever thought Man United were going to win this game. Now they did have a couple chances here. Newcastle blitzed early, but after that did suffer a little bit where they didn't have a lot of the ball, and there were a couple chances. I think Casemiro had something towards the end of the first half. It was an open goal. He probably could have done better. You look at again. It's the same thing I was saying earlier. You look at this Newcastle team. And the one kind of weakness is you can get someone making a run in behind Fabian Schär. I think Rasmus Højlund was able to get in behind, where someone was able to find him, thread him in. And Højlund probably could have done a little bit better to get that on goal. If it's on goal, I think it's probably a goal. So maybe you go win 2-1 after despite getting outplayed. Maybe you have a chance in the second half. In the second half, though, again, they had a little bit more of the ball, slightly more control, but you're playing a back three, and you're not able to really get a whole lot of numbers forward. And outside of that, I think Harry Maguire, I think actually hit the post with a header. It never really felt like Man United really had a way to really get back into the game, and the two goals was all Newcastle needed. This was rough though, but the shape to start this was weird. So no Bruno Fernandes available to play, and what he did is he played Joshua Xerxes, and Xerxes wasn't played as like a number 10 or in midfield. It felt like it was almost kind of a three. So you're playing with three to press, Newcastle's back line, you have three, but Newcastle will also keep in Trippier, so it wasn't necessarily 3-on-2, it was 3-on-3, essentially, and they had no issues, getting past those three players, Ahmad, Rasmus, and Xerxes. No issues of getting past them. And once you got past them, then you've got Casemiro and you've got Christian Eriksen basically having to mark all three people of Brito, Joe Lenton, and Antonali. All three that are very technically savvy. All three that are uh, very physical, very large. And it was you had sometimes Ishak running in where someone like someone at the center back spot wasn't following Isak, so Isak would create a numbers advantage for Newcastle that way. You'd sometimes have Gordon running in or Murphy. It was just there's constant running, and it felt like Newcastle just had as many numbers as they wanted to fit in that little area where Man United did not have people following him in. And you already have two of the slowest players in the league essentially at this point in time having to cover all of that, and so it was hard game planning, and Newcastle had no issues, getting the ball in that kind of, basically the halfway line or final third, beginning of the final third area, and then from there you also have the athletes to then make runs into a backline that is always in retreat mode. And the other thing that they were doing was so it was a 5-2-3, and the five becomes the issue as well. They were doing a back five, and if you're spreading it out, that's okay. But for some reason, they were playing a back five that was very narrow, and the reason why they were doing that is they didn't think either Harry Maguire or De Ligt could handle Isak running through them. And so you saw Mazraoui sometimes kind of playing next to De Ligt as much as possible, which meant the channel was wide open if Diallo didn't necessarily track either Lewis Hall or Anthony Gordon. And so Newcastle had so many times when they just had Gordon or Lewis Hall completely free to put it across if they wanted to. And if you're able to send it across that beats Harry Maguire, beats De Ligt, the next person in the back is a 5'8", 5'7" Lisandro Martinez. And I'm not necessarily the tallest of stature either, so I do have a little bit of sympathy here, but you shouldn't be playing this guy at center back. And I think you're really seeing the effects of that. Someone like a Lenny Euro is available to play. I don't understand why he's not getting game time now. Lisandro Martinez has been a good player for them in some respects, but he's never really been great at defending crosses, and I think you're really seeing the limits of that. I still think you could find a way to play him, maybe play him somewhat inverted, maybe find a way to get him in midfield that could help you out. You do like his aggressiveness, and he was good versus Man City, but it was entirely different. I think the Man City game maybe fooled Ruben Amorim. He thought he could line up the same way because he was able to play Harry Maguire and De Ligt versus Haaland. Uh, they had no issues with Jeremy Doku, or at that time it was Mateus Nunes playing at fullback, doing overlaps or doing creating overloads on that side and whipping crosses in. They didn't have that issue, and I guess he thought, well, it worked for Man City, it'll work for Newcastle. And Newcastle are not Man City right now. Alexander Isak is not like Holland at the minute. It's kind of weird to say that, but definitely Anthony Gordon is not like Jeremy Doku. I mean, there were a couple of times also when they were able to kind of isolate Mateus De Ligt out wide, and that hurt them as well. Gordon was able to just get past him like it was just like no one was really even there. So they're having lots of issues everywhere, and Amorim kind of fixed it a little bit by getting Kobe Mano back in. Basically, you had a midfield three. After that point, it was more like a 5-3-2, as opposed to the opposite. Xerxes wasn't working out, but I don't necessarily think it was necessarily totally his fault. And the fans got on him a little bit. You could maybe argue that the fans were cheering for Kobe Mano because they maybe saw that they needed a third midfielder in there as well, and it did. Stop the bleeding a little bit. Man United were better, at least somewhat controlling the ball, where Newcastle, it didn't look like Newcastle was going to score 9. That's how the game changed. It never felt like Newcastle was going to lose that game, and so they have some issues. The Mateus, the Harry Maguire and De Ligt together. You see the limits of one. You combine them. When you combine both limits, when you have both together, I don't really understand it. They're just way too slow. Um, and the other thing too is Mazurai and Dallo. You can exploit them even when they're defending. A couple of times it's just really easy for a Murphy or Joe Linton, someone to just get behind, even Dallo when he's defending. So that hurts you as well. He doesn't have the players to necessarily play the way he wants to. Also, Dallo is right footed, fully, and he was like your player of the season last year when he was right fullback. You're playing at left back. You have to do that because Shaw or Malacia haven't really worked out either. I have a little sympathy there, but that's just you look at that's a recruitment kind of mistake a little bit there as well. And right now, he doesn't really have people to play in those kind of wing back areas because when you play with a back five, it needs to find a way to be a back three where you can get those guys forward, and you need to have some kind of threat, and they don't really have that. So a lot of this was rough, and again, it feels like he's squeezing squares into round holes. The wingbacks to do this needs to be more of a threat, either 1v1 to just get by someone, or to have really good delivery. And Diallo can't do that with his wrong foot. Uh, and the other thing that's kind of funny is you've basically maybe when Dallo or Mazurai do get the ball, they're so far behind the play that they're not ever really making runs to be kind of almost like a winger kind of mindset, an offensive kind of mindset. And so when they get the ball, what do they have really in front of them? They don't really have runners ahead of them either. So and more on what he's done is he's killed the offense. Maybe he's made them a little bit more kind of structured. That's a word I keep using. It's not as easy to necessarily play through. At least when Kobe Mano came on, so you don't have nearly as many gaps. But they don't have any way to really advance the ball quickly anymore. You don't have, and you've taken out all the speed in your attack. You've taken out Garnacho and Rashford, and you replace them with kind of more kind of dual kind of tens, I guess you can say, to work in half spaces. And the only way for those half spaces to appear is if you have people making runs out wide. So I think I saw a stat online. I didn't really double check it. I probably should have, but I feel like it's accurate. Is all of Man United's goals since Mormon has come in have happened when someone that was playing in one of the wing backs wasn't a defensive minded player. It was either when Garnacho was playing there, or Anthony, or Ahmad Diallo, and it feels like that's what he needs to do. He needs to kind of run into more of kind of doing that, finding a way to play a little bit more kind of offensive minded players in that position. Now, maybe they aren't going to be as good defensively, but you need to do something. Also, the team to me is not good enough. It's not stacked with enough talent to sit both Rashford and Garnacho, and I don't really care if they don't fit your double tens or your wingbacks. I honestly think they probably need to change the system uh, to at least get to a point uh, until you get players that work there. It's very troubling to me a little bit because even if you're a possession based side and it feels like he's trying to do that, and by playing with the three, you are able to have a little bit more control. Harry Maguire has Delict that's always there. You always have more options. But eventually, you've got to be able to stretch teams to get in behind them. To push back lines back, you've got Fabian Schär and Dan Burr that are just able to just camp out at the halfway line because there's no real threat in behind them. You need to have a way to have people to go forward because if nothing else, you allow the other team to just kind of really squeeze you, and you don't really have options to pass. If you have people making runs ahead, that opens things up a little bit. Where weirdly enough, the possession you can still do side to side stuff, but the point I'm trying to make is even these possession focused, obsessed sides, you still need to have runners to stretch teams. That's something that Pep I think has lost in all of these years. A lot of managers have struggled a little bit with that. So uh, we'll see what they do versus Liverpool and if they can eke out something or not. I want Liverpool players to remember what happened around this time last year, or maybe it was a little later in the year. Where it was around maybe February or March when Man United kind of killed Liverpool's season. There was all this fun. There was all this enjoyment, and Sending Klopp out, the right way, I guess you can say, with loads of trophies, and they get to at the quarterfinal of the FA Cup. They play at Old Trafford, and they lose that game in extra time, conceding two late goals, both times. And then they played they played Man United. Maybe both games were at Old Trafford. I can't really remember in the league, and they drew that game 2-2 as well, and that really did just kill the momentum. So it doesn't really matter if Man United are not necessarily in the best of form. Now is the time to strike and strike hot. So we'll see if Liverpool are able to do or not. Uh, and let's see. One final thing to talk about because I mentioned how Amorim has come in and he's very very rigid. He doesn't want to change anything. One thing that is kind of interesting to me is Van Nistelrooy went 3 games unbeaten with this team. Now it is a small sample size, I understand. What he was doing is he was playing Rashford. He was playing Dallo right back. He was playing Mascherano left back. Funny enough, he wasn't playing Harry Maguire, so he had the nuts, the wherewithal to do that. Now he did have Ugarte. Ugarte was helping out in some of those games as well. Now the it was against kind of the lower kind of teams. You can't say that. I think his last game was versus Leicester. Uh, and maybe you can argue that ownership didn't want to get caught into another kind of Ali Shelsar situation where maybe you give Van Nistelrooy the season. Maybe he finishes, I don't know, 8th or 7th, and what do you do at that point as well? So maybe they just figured Morum was available. Morum, someone that a lot of clubs, top clubs, have wanted. It made sense to strike when the iron hot. It was hot, but the problem with doing that is you've basically uh, you've got to commit now to him. And I don't know if the ownership necessarily is understands what that means because you've got players that have basically been playing in a pure counter-attacking side for like 6 seasons in a row, essentially, and not just a counter-attacking side, a side that just has not really been able to control the ball, not have any kind of possession at all. Very open-minded games where this is entirely different. Also, you've allowed Bruno to have a free role where he's been allowed to have loads of spaces, loads of freedom to where he wants to do his movement. Here, it's almost kind of more structured or limited to what he can do. It is entirely different, and so we'll see if they're able to fix that or not. But they've got a lot of to do that. They're going to have to do a lot of player sales, and I already kind of mentioned it before. One of the players that one of the things that's happened as well is they should have gotten rid of Eric Ten Hag last summer. Now, maybe Ten Hag wouldn't have been available. You don't really know. I mean, maybe Ruben Amorim wouldn't have been available if they had done that. But you allowed basically him winning a trophy to close your judgment a little bit, and by allowing him to stay, what you did is you allowed him to have another transfer window. And you look at what he did, he brought in Joshua Zirkzee. And now man, is he not working out now? Now, again, I don't think it was necessarily his fault versus Newcastle. I just don't think that the system or the approach really works for him. He's someone that really wants to kind of run to the ball a little bit. Now he's really tall, but for some reason he's not the most athletic. Now he can, do some things with the ball. He can do some link up plays. But again, I look at him like someone that wants to, someone that kind of wants to play as almost like a false nine, I guess you can say. Runs in, he links up play, maybe can be a target into the box. But when you play someone like that, you need to have pace ahead of him. So if the idea was for Ten Hag was having is we'll have someone that can drop in that can make an additional number in midfield if needed for build up, and you'll always have Rashford or you'll have Garnacho or Diallo. You're making sprints ahead, kind of running ahead and becoming your strikers in that respect. And in that situation, that makes sense. But that was for Ten Hag, and you brought in someone that doesn't really play like that. Someone that is basically used to having someone like a Victor Gilchrist, not necessarily who's basically a bagsman. And Rasmus Højlund is getting some chances, and he's not putting him away. And Xerxes doesn't make those runs in behind either. And so you're struggling. You're seeing where having multiple managers, multiple kind of styles, coming in with players that have been brought to play a certain way, and they really haven't worked out. But also it, you can play any kind of structure system you want. If you have very slow, very unathletic players that can't cover a lot of distance, you're going to get beat. And I think that's kind of showing up a little bit as well. The other thing to talk about with Xerxes is when he was at Bologna, he had someone like Ndoye, Dan Ndoye, to run ahead of him. And I think again that's kind of where I think the thinking was, but it's not. The other thing too is one of the reasons why things weren't working with Ten Hag is Casemiro had lost his legs and he never really had a defensive minded kind of guy to recover a lot of distance and clear things up a little bit in front of a back line to offer the back line some kind of protection. That's where Ugarte was supposed to come in, but the weird thing was is Ten Hag wasn't always playing him, and so I think that's maybe what ultimately got him sacked. So there are risk involved in loads of ways. One thing I can say is uh, I've always criticized United for not really having structure, and Morm is giving them structure. Maybe not necessarily the structure they need at the time, but at least there is some of that. And we'll see what they do versus Liverpool coming in. Uh, if they're going to set up probably defensively. Now they were able to frustrate Man United or Man City just recently. We'll see if Liverpool struggle in the same kind of same kind of manner. We'll have to see. Uh, and then already talked a little bit with Newcastle. So we'll get started with the kind of the top three. See how we're doing for time here. Let's see. It's not too bad. All right. So how has Liverpool's festive fixture gone? They beat Spurs 6-3 with goals from Luis Diaz. Great cross in by Trent Alexander-Arnold. That game really could have been any kind of number, to be honest. The way Liverpool were all over Tottenham. Tottenham were playing again with a very makeshift kind of back line, and that really showed. I think in the first 2 minutes, Foster just being pressed, passed the ball right to Salah, and Salah probably could have done a little bit better there. And then there's another cross in, this time from the other fullback in Robertson. It's one of these where Robertson isn't always ahead of the ball anymore. He's kind of playing a little bit kind of deeper. And what happens is I think Gakpo gets the ball and does it's either Gakpo or Diaz gets the ball and it's basically kind of a cutback cross to Robertson, joining in the attack, and then Robertson, one time hits it into the box, and I think it's Dominic Szoboszlai that wins the first header. Again, Archie Gray, Archie Gray has the size, but he's also 18 years old. He's just not used to this, to defending like this. He's also not really a center back by trade, and Szoboszlai wins the first header, and then Alexis basically there to get the rebound. And then all of a sudden you look and Madison does get one past Allison, make it 2-1. You figure despite getting outplayed, 2-1 is not the worst result to go into halftime with. And then right before halftime, it ends up being 3-2-1. And that it felt like that basically did kill the game. And this comes where Spurs maybe have a little of the pressure there. They're actually pressing Liverpool quite well. Trent just does just a hopeful ball. I don't really think there's any kind of intent behind this. So he clears it upfield, and here it's Luis Diaz or it's Szoboszlai that actually wins the header, and then gets to Salah, and then Salah basically plays in Szoboszlai, running in behind, and just again just a long ball. I think it's Dragic that gets played out, or it's Archie Gray that gets played out. There's no Udogie anywhere, and it basically Liverpool able to just one kind of winning a header, winning a 50-50 header. Are able to just basically play in a guy to get completely in behind, and all he has to do is beat the keeper, and he's able to beat Fraser Foster with ease. And then the second half, it was quite easy. Salah gets basically two. A couple of these were tap-ins, and then Kulusevski and then Solanke made it 5-3, and then Luis Diaz at the very end made it 6-3 after Salah was able to find him. So. And I think afterwards it came out that Liverpool basically targeted Dragic on the ball. So, talked about how, Spurs played in with a bit of a makeshift back line, and they've come in, they've recruited Dragic to offer them some depth, and unfortunately for them, he's had to play a lot of games for them, and he looks a bit lost, defensively. Not really the best with the ball at his feet, and he can't really defend in a high line, and that's kind of what Ange Postecoglou needs his defenders to do. So that's not helping them. But the thing that I want to talk about here, because I saw a lot of people criticizing the Spurs kind of setup, criticizing Ange Postecoglou, the way he was playing. You look at how they conceded the first two goals. it wasn't necessarily like uh, Spurs were taking a whole lot of chances and just kind of losing the ball. Now they were doing that in the first half and they were giving away chances, but they didn't actually lead to any goals. The first two goals came from really just a couple crosses into the box that they could not deal with. And so you get to 2-0, and now you have to, kind of chase the game a little bit. That's when they started playing a higher line, and that's when Liverpool were just able to get in behind for fun. That's where basically the third goal came from. And then, in the second half, they have to play high, they have to press, and Liverpool had no issues, going through that. Alexis McAllister and Szoboszlai, probably the two best games that they played all season. Gakpo and Luis Diaz as well. You're starting to really see kind of a different kind of Liverpool setup than we're used to seeing. When I first started that lineup, I was a little concerned because I figured I kind of want Darwin Núñez to play in a game like this, where you figured they've got really two slow center backs. You probably want someone like a Nunez to make runs in behind. That's what Klopp would have done. And instead, they basically Liverpool played a false nine with Luis Diaz. Uh, but man, did it work out! And when it mattered, when Luis Diaz was in the box, he was able to get on the end with a great header to score the first goal, and had a number of really clever runs, really clever flicks that basically led to a couple tap-ins in the second half. So you're starting to see a number of people contribute where it's not just Mo Salah. Now Salah is is still basically having some kind of role in all the goals that they are scoring, but it's not just him that's finally putting things away. You're starting to get contributions everywhere now. And so that is kind of where we are. It's and the interesting thing to me is I've gotten to a point now because I've seen Diaz play in this false nine in a couple of times now. We saw it versus West Ham as well, and I'm starting to be really won by it. Or the all of a sudden you're seeing a little bit of the idea where you're seeing Gakpo play it off the left, where when Diaz maybe drops in, or Diaz can kind of come in on the left and receive the ball. Gakpo can make those runs centrally as well, and it feels like the way that Liverpool have now changed a little of the setup. When Luis Diaz is dropping in, you've got a whoever is playing in the number 10 role, and whether it's Szoboszlai or Curtis Jones, he's now playing further ahead as well. So you're almost seeing like a front three. You're almost seeing a 4-3-3 with Luis Diaz with a false nine. And what that means is you're almost seeing a diamond kind of midfield shape. This is what Jurgen Klopp had when Liverpool won the league. This if they do it with Firmino, so it's different to see it with Luis Diaz. Luis Diaz was supposed to be a winger, but he's also had some knee injuries, and I've thought for the last couple of years now Luis Diaz doesn't take his player on when he's on the wing nearly as much. Now he's gotten a little bit better at that. But one thing he's very good at doing is he's always had very good touch, and what he's incredibly at doing is he's very good at dribbling with the ball. He's a very good ball carrier, and we're seeing now he's starting to find a finish. Now, I mentioned how Roberto Firmino. The other kind of comparison I can make is when Liverpool moved Sadio Mane into being kind of this false nine. Kind of they moved Mane a little bit more centrally when Diaz first came to the club in that 22 year. That to me is maybe a little bit more kind of probably a better comparison to make, where you're kind of asking a player to learn a new position. It seems like that's what Arne Slot is doing. And it's also a player that you didn't think would be necessarily the best finisher because he wasn't really scoring from the left. Now he's starting to show he can be a bagsman as well, and he's leading in a lot of goals. Now he started off the season actually scoring a lot as well. So that's where we are for that game, and then we get to Leicester. This was a fog arid game, and basically it starts with Liverpool conceding first with Patson Daka. No Vardy this game. That probably maybe helped out a little bit because Leicester weren't bad, at least in that opening half. Robertson error, and that has kind of started to be a little bit of an issue. Last time I talked, Robertson was suspended himself for Fulham. We're starting to see a lot of goals conceded now, where Robertson is kind of at the heart a little bit of the crime scene, and unfortunately happens a little bit here now. It wasn't just Robinson. Virgil van Dijk maybe could have done a little bit better. Trent Alexander-Arnold. They found a way. Leicester found a way to kind of get a little bit of a ball in that channel and across into the box gave a lot of fits. So there you go, 1-0. And it took a while for Liverpool to get back into the game, and it looked like it was going to get to halftime where it was with Leicester in the lead, and then Gakpo got the ball cut onto his right foot and had a wonder shot. Gakpo when he's on can shoot with as good as any of them. To be honest. So and that was needed. That was one of those where Liverpool went into halftime all square. it was a game that they played okay. Lots of chances, lots of crosses. They had something like 20 crosses in the first 35 minutes or so. It was very very dogged, very hard to get a whole lot of really good looks. And one thing I was thinking about is I was watching this and I was like, Curtis Jones is that 10 role versus kind of a low block. You maybe want someone that's a little more kind of creative, a little more inventive. And instead, that thankfully, backfired a little bit on me because Curtis Jones gets the second goal. Now we did see a bit of a change. We've seen a lot of that in this year with Arne Slot. They've said something where a lot of the goals Liverpool have scored have come in the second halves. I think they said all of but like one of Mo Salah's goals have come in the second halves, and we see a little tweak. And what the tweak is we see Trent playing a little bit further wide. But really, the main thing is we're seeing kind of midfield runs a little bit more. So we see Alexis McAllister basically running behind Salah, gets to the byline, and it's an easy little cutback ball for Curtis Jones to making a run into the box, and then Salah made it 3-1 to just kind of close the game out. Really good play on the wing again. Gets it, cuts inside Christensen, and basically, scores from kind of a tight angle. It was kind of, looking on the highlight, it was surprising how he was able to kind of fit that in. But Salah's been very good at doing that. Basically, passes it into the net. So I mean, that was a game where you avoided the injuries, so that was positive. It was filled with fog, hard to watch, probably hard for the players to see. The only thing to say about this was Nunez got the start, not Diaz. And here, he got on the end of a couple solid passes. He did get a couple good shots off. He was right at the keeper, but good hard shots. But for the most part, you're seeing him. He's getting lost. He's not getting the looks in the numbers that he got last season. And I think one thing you're starting to see is this is where the difference between Slots Liverpool this season to where Klopp had it last year is Nunez isn't the outlet anymore. He's not the one that they're looking to do, balls over the top to make these runs anymore. They're now asking Salah to kind of stay high and do that. Where last year it was Salah that was kind of running to the ball a little bit more. He was playing on the touchline a little bit more. It really was Nunez that was supposed to be the one kind of doing the stretching. We haven't seen that nearly as much this season. So when Nunez is getting the ball, it's more kind of in the box, and it's more versus teams that are kind of set against him. And it looks like he's really struggling in that kind of respect. So it's very weird to say it's not necessarily working out. There's still a lot of ways for that to fix itself. Uh, a lot of players so far, to me, have improved from where they were, last season. I'm not going to say it's because Klopp wasn't, working with them, but something that Slot's doing is working wonders because Curtis Jones looks a different player than I've seen. Now he's also a year older. He's finally starting to get more and more game time. But Curtis Jones finally has an eye for a pass. Curtis Jones is not nearly the liability that I used to think he was. Gakpo looks much better, playing off the left, but he's also got a recognition to, make those runs in the middle if needed. He's amazing in physical contest, in duels. We're saying Luis Diaz, looked like a different player this season. Gravenberch, as people have already talked about, Szoboszlai is starting to look a little bit better when he's played. He's starting to maybe get a little bit more sense of what the 10 position kind of is because people were a little bit on him for not necessarily, leading to goals either. So this was we're starting to see a little bit of a different kind of look here. And the other thing I wanted to say is in this case, or in this game, it was really noticeable at least in the second half, or maybe even the first half. Uh, Trent Alexander-Arnold was getting the ball, and he wasn't trying to show for the ball in midfield. He was staying wide. And the times when he was moving into midfield, there would be someone that would take his spot. So you saw Curtis Jones actually doing this a lot, where he would actually be the one that would be furthest wide. And that would allow Trent Alexander-Arnold to go be higher up, to play in midfield or to make a run here and there. So Trent Alexander-Arnold still has freedom to do this, but it's not. It doesn't feel like it's freedom by himself. It's freedom if someone else is offering to take his spot, and it feels like you can do that in a way to make you less susceptible to maybe when you lose the ball you're not asking someone like a Joe Gomez to make these sprints all the way down the channel where you're exposing yourself a little bit by having your fullback in no man's land. It does feel like that's sensible. And so far it seems like the communication to do that, the rotation is there, so that's positive. And then we get to the West Ham game, and this is really where the magic really started to happen because you're starting to score goals for fun. First with Diaz, and then Gakpo, and then you have the Salah magic at three. The Gakpo one had Salah magic as well, where little trickiness on the refs, where Salah was played basically. There was a long ball over top. I think it's being played by Alexis McAllister, and Salah basically is offsides, but he doesn't really run to the ball. He runs away from it. It allows Trent to get to it. Then Trent plays it to Salah, and Salah basically has a touch that completely fools. I think it's Max Kilman. Basically nutmegs him, and and then he does another kind of nutmeg with his other touch. That one probably wasn't on purpose. And then Gakpo into the box, making a box crashing run. He's not from the wing anymore. He's right there where he needs to be, and he's able to put that away. And then horrid play by West Ham, just complete giveaway. I think it's Curtis Jones that wins the ball back. He's able to find Salah with the pass, so good on Jones there. And then Salah basically passes into the net. Keeper probably could have done better, but it is what it is. The first goal with Diaz came where I think Diaz is trying to play Curtis Jones, but Curtis Jones makes a really good run forward. So that kind of creates a little of this too. That ball is kind of deflected, but Diaz then gets on to the end of it and has a great shot. I called him Luis Diaz, Suarez, essentially after that. And then the second half starts, and the Trent Alexander-Arnold basically scores from the kind of top of the box. There's a big deflection, so that's why it wrong folks the keeper, and then Diego Jota makes it 5 at the end, where Salah has a very nice dribble, and then he's able to play Jota in. Jota came in and looked a little bit rusty, to be honest, but he always has a great finish. Jota's like the funniest player in the world because if you watch him for a number of games, he plays like this every game, where you look at him and you're like, is he even a professional football? I don't necessarily want to go that far, but you look at him and he has a lot of these "what are you doing" kind of plays, and then he ends the game off with a goal every single time he plays, essentially. That's kind of funny. The other thing I want to say is Salah has a great dribble, but he maybe waits too long to get this pass off, and Jota does very good to actually hold his run back and runs backward a little bit to stay on sides. Otherwise, someone like I don't want to call out Darwin Núñez, but someone like him might have strayed off sides a little bit because it was Salah did not pass the ball probably maybe he should have, and then so that is where we are for that game. West Ham were bad. There's no going around it defensively. It was way too easy for Liverpool to create overloads. Way too easily to get bodies near the ball to turn West Ham over. Kudus played well for West Ham, you can say, but that was kind of it. Bowen got hurt in the second half, and I think their attention just turned to monitoring that, and kind of limited that damage. They played a back five, and Wan-Bissaka was supposed to cover on Salah. Wan-Bissaka was played on the other side of the field. That did not work. That was rough for them, and so Liverpool now are top of the table, have a little gap to play with. It's not a ton. They have the games in hand, but what has changed? So we'll get started with the Luis Diaz false nine. It's entirely changes the offense, to be honest. But you have someone that's dropping away, running to drop away from center backs to give Liverpool an extra man. Now, if you're playing against a very, very deep, back line, they're not really going to care about that. But when you're playing against quote unquote mid block, this is giving them hell. This is giving teams hell. So far it's working. But you have that extra man. You can kind of do all these combinations. But it's a problem too. It's not a problem because you always have Salah staying high, and Gakpo is doing well to stay high too. So you still have options ahead, and that's kind of the important part. When Diaz gets the ball, or when the tens get the ball, that you still have runners ahead of them to join in. Sometimes you even see, like I said, Curtis Jones or Szoboszlai, taking that main striker spot. So sometimes you still have like a front three when Diaz, drops underneath and decides to either link up or help create. Sometimes you see Gakpo playing through the middle when Luis Diaz maybe goes out wide to collect the ball. So you're seeing the attack very fluid in a way that it hasn't been for a number of years. Now Salah is still staying basically, kind of on the right side for the most part, but Diaz and Gakpo are, switch rotating a ton. We're also seeing the number 10 spot rotate a little bit there. I mentioned how sometimes they're going into the number 9 spot. Sometimes they're going out to help out, take Trent's position. To be honest, there's a lot of rotation here. The other thing that I think has changed is it feels like Gravenberch is kind of playing in a low pivot now. He's almost like learned the position, and maybe that does make them a little bit vulnerable, a little bit light in defense because what you're doing is you're allowing Lexus to go further up, and if you do lose the ball, then one less body to maybe cut out some danger in front of the back line. But Lexus being played further up, Lexus is starting to lead to some goals now, or at least lead to some end product now. I guess we can say he's always been good, but he's really started to turn it up as far as getting assists or getting a big chance creation. Uh, he's always had a good killer eye for a three ball, and it gets the deep blocks. There've been a couple of times where he just has a beautiful touch on his pass to float balls in that are finding the runs unmarked into the box. You mentioned Trent's positioning being a little bit different. Again, having the freedom, but only having freedom uh, when he has a teammate that's on the same page. And the other one is the offense is running through Salah now, not Darwin Nunez. So that kind of goes a little bit where I was talking about maybe where Nunez is struggling, but also where Salah is having an unreal Ballon d'Or-like campaign to start the first half of this season. Now, he was very good last season as well around this time. And then what happened is he got injured during African Cup of Nations. He was overplayed, and you do a little worry a little bit about that here because if Salah does happen to him, you don't really see who could come in and replace anything like what he has done, not just in Liverpool, in the world. Essentially, he has been that good to this half of the season. So uh, I think one thing to end with is ultimately the real reason why Liverpool have been so good is they have attackers willing to run. They have midfielders willing to work with and without the ball, and they have defenders that can head away crosses, but also defend in a high line. It feels kind of easy and simplistic to say, but you see a lot of the first part is kind of the main sauce. You have so many people willing to with a desire, with the just willing to do a whole lot of hard sprints upfield without the ball. Maybe you're not even going to be rewarded with it. But by doing that, you always have options ahead of them, and because you always have runners doing that. You've got defenders that are kind of worried about letting someone, getting behind them. So you got defenders that are going to run back with you, and that creates space ahead of people with the ball. And they now have midfielders or people defenders that get the ball with their feet. If there is space ahead of them, they're not afraid to carry it anymore. It's not just they don't have limited people with the ball at their feet anywhere. You have Gravenberch is brilliant at doing that. Alexis as well. Curtis Jones has really grown into that role, and Slobosly has as well. And you add Trent Alexander-Arnold into that equation. Sometimes he can be a little bit risky with kind of the balls he wants to play in, but he's very good. I don't have to talk about that as well. So and it's really big, especially like you wouldn't think about it, but even with low blocks, um, when you've got runners coming in that are kind of deep, it's kind of like a late run. Sometimes it can maybe be unmarked, and so it's really important to always have runners coming in box crashing runners from midfield as well. It's not just the kind of the front line especially versus these low blocks. You need to start. That's when you really need to have your midfield kind of step up. And in past years, Liverpool have really struggled with that kind of respect. Now they had people like Henderson or James Milner or a Fabinho or Gini Wijnaldum. Only like Naby Keita comes to mind that was really good at, or Oxlade-Chamberlain that was really good at doing that. Now Liverpool kind of have that. I haven't even mentioned someone like a Harvey Elliott who feels like he would be able to do that as well if he was given the game time. He hasn't been able uh, to, to to get a lot of time since he's been come back injured, but still a lot of the second half of the season to come and a lot of games for him to get some time. So that's kind of just where we are. It didn't used to be. In the early half of the season, I was really worried about Salah for goals. Where would other people come from? Now they're coming in from everywhere in a number of players and a number of situations. So we'll see. We'll see how this works out versus a team that's very, very good at defending in this quote unquote deep block that is given Liverpool Fitz hell in a lot of years. And the perfect team that's coming up is about to test them in Nottingham Forest. Funny enough, as Nottingham Forest or the team that's kind of chasing them along with Arsenal, but Nottingham Forest are the team that's been kind of hunting on a slot this entire season. Honestly, because they're the team that did beat him. And I watched that game live, and that was a game that one. A lot of the South American players came in and were too tired from the international break, so Luis Diaz wasn't his best. Alexis McAllister, I don't even know if he played or basically had to be subbed out, and they tried Trent Alexander-Arnold in midfield, and it was a disaster. They were very bad, defensively, but they were very just dysfunctional in that game. And here now, we're maybe seeing a bit of an engine that's kind of running pretty good. Now, again, they'll have to deal with, the occasional injury here and there, and they do have some negatives, coming into this. Joe Gomez gets hurt, versus West Ham, and apparently, tweaked his hamstring a little bit, so they're already short on center back depth, with Konate still out there. And you have distractions out there. You have Trent Alexander-Arnold having that contract saga that's a distraction, but all three have expiring contracts at the end of the year, and it doesn't feel like any of those have been sorted. Now clubs can actually, come look for them and sign them on freeze. There's all this talk about Trent Alexander-Arnold to Real Madrid, and to me, I'm looking at all 3, and I think Madrid, if they had the sense, would try to target all 3, if nothing else to rattle Liverpool a little bit. But Salah, feels like he fits on the right. You already, have a relationship with Trent Alexander-Arnold, and then you have Virgil van Dijk. It doesn't feel like he would have an issue, struggling in that Madrid shirt. So maybe I should stop talking. I don't want any of that to come to fruition. I just think it's been very, very poor by the ownership to allow this to happen because it's inexcusable. To be honest, you could have done it in the summer. You did nothing in the summer really. You signed a goalkeeper, and then you had that whole fall to sort things out. You didn't get it done, and now you have 6 months until all of their contracts end. And now teams can talk to club, or now those players can talk to other clubs. So this is not good. That To say that'll be a distraction is an understatement. If it's not already, it already is to me now, but it will be as we get close to a title run, and if Liverpool are still leading the chase. And then the other one is Andy Robinson. I already spoke about that even before this because a lot of the goals are coming down his side now. Now a lot of goals are also coming because Kanate has been out, so uh, it's not. I'm not expecting Liverpool to just win out the rest of the way. There's still a lot of ways for this to tighten up and to change. I don't think anyone's going to get close to 90 points to win this league. Uh, I'm kind of looking at 86. I'd probably be put a flag on that being safe. 86 points, maybe 88. But if someone gets to 88, I definitely think you're good. 86 is maybe what I would look at, and that would require Liverpool to because they're on pace to I think actually have over 90. Uh, but again, I don't necessarily know how feasible it is to continue that run, especially as the more and more games kind of ratchet up. You still have they're still live in the Carabao Cup. You have two to kind of two legs with Spurs. In that, I don't really know. I don't really want Arne Slot to play the strongest team. If you can have kids that can help you advance. Great. Uh, I don't really want, Salah to play in any of those, but we'll have to see if that happens or not. I don't want Virgil van Dijk to play in any of that. Save his legs. You still have Champions League, still live in Champions League. It's still live in FA Cup. Hopefully, kids play in that too. So we'll see how this goes. And then we get to Man City, who are not in the top 4 anymore. Just kind of recap what happened with them is they go ahead and they lose to Aston Villa. No one could stop Morgan Rogers just ball carrying or making runs in behind John Duran either. Then they drew to Everton 1-1. They could have maybe won that game. Holland had a PK miss. Everton, though, did look dangerous on a number of transition moments. Ndiaye basically scores on a cross that I think it's Ake or Kanji couldn't clear. Then Rico Lewis kind of gets lost a little bit. It's a fantastic touch and finish by Ndiaye, but that was a game that was very interesting because Man United or Man City weren't bad. They finally stopped doing this Bernardo Silva on the wing stuff. That wasn't working out. They played him in midfield. They asked him to, make some runs into the box, and that basically is how they get their first goal. You played Savio instead on the right, and Savio had a pretty good game, in my opinion. He's actually the one that actually created the PK. Had a number of really good moments as well. So that I thought that was something you can maybe kind of hang on to if you were a Man City fan. Versus Aston Villa, that was they looked lost. They looked lost defensively. I think Pepe even made a couple of subs defensively. I think they lost John Stones at halftime. Pep's been trying to get guys back, and what he's doing is I think he's playing guys that still aren't really able to play, and he's risking injury, and we're seeing that happening over and over again. I think Kyle Walker has been injured the entire season. That he just hasn't looked right either. You get Kovacic back. Kovacic is playing in midfield now in a couple of these games, and he's not a number six. He's not a holder. He's not what Rodri is, and so that you're still continuing to see that being a problem. And then with Leicester, you get a reprieve where you actually win the game. You win it 2-0. But none of that looks convincing to me. Holland ends his mania drought, so that's positive. Savinho continues to play well for them. This time he played on the left side. Foden continues to be a little bit of a shadow of himself, so that's not great. But it doesn't matter because City actually were able to bring on someone like a James McAtee, who actually led to, I think, the second goal. Finally, you had someone that was able to beat his man and be able to create a little bit, and then found Kevin De Bruyne, and then Kevin De Bruyne found Savinho. That was another thing too. Kevin De Bruyne had probably his best game so far since he retired, or since maybe the Nottingham Forest game. Kevin De Bruyne looked bright. Kevin De Bruyne looked like he had energy. You don't know how much that can continue. If he's maybe on a minutes restriction or not. I've been waiting for him to explode, and he because I had him in fantasy, and he was doing nothing. There were a couple of times when actually Pep was playing Foden instead when Kevin De Bruyne was available. I think he did that versus Aston Villa. Foden has not worked out at all, and so if Kevin De Bruyne is good to go, I think you still need to go with him. But versus this Leicester City side, this was weird because Leicester's had no issues through City trying to press them, trying to run them out. And, they struck the post twice. I think Vardy had some misses that I think he could have done a little bit better on. Um, Leicester, I do think, felt hard done by not getting something, but Connor Cody is a big problem for them, and he can't really defend. I think he's basically playing Holland on for a couple of those on sides, and so I think that's where they have issues. But there is some promise here. Harry Winks and El Kunis, Bornete, they had people that were good at being able to play through danger. Actually, I thought Vestergaard was as good as he's been as far as being on the ball. Connor Cody actually wasn't bad when he had the ball at his feet. So they weren't just going long to go long. They had majority of the ball versus Man City. And Man City were trying to press and to get them to turn it over. But you can't. Bernardo Silva looks like his legs are just completely shot. Kovacic likewise. He has some legs, but he's running away from. He's getting played out of position basically. And when you do that, there's a lot of space in the middle. And Leicester were finding guys to just receive the ball there. Uh, no one's following. The back line's not really following. It feels like Ruben Diaz or whoever's been playing back there needs protection. And again, Man City get the win, but this could have been a lot worse than it was. But that said, there was some rays of light to offer some hope. Like I mentioned, Savio played well. Holland, scoring again. Now he didn't have that big of a drought, but he did score a little bit there. Poor marking again by Cody's. Is what it is, and then he was able to have a nice header to score. Foden isn't working out, but James McAtee with a little impressive cameo. All of a sudden, he's linked to a ton of clubs as well. We have seen him actually played in a loan spell. We saw him played for Sheffield last year. Wasn't the worst, but again, he was on a team that just not at all at the level, so it was hard to really judge him by. You wonder if he's going to get more game time. Also, they're not far away from apparently getting Oscar Bob back. So, in that situation, I don't know what you do with Phil Foden. I've seen a lot of City fans suggest Phil Foden isn't really an attack-minded player anymore. Now he can do that job like we saw last season with a lot of the goals that he got. But what he really is he's a midfielder, and that's what they keep telling me. So if that is the case, time to kind of show proof to the pudding, I guess you can say. Uh, instead of playing Bernardo Silva, who has no legs at all to run at him anymore, play Phil Foden in midfield. Play Phil Foden next to Kovacic. Find a way to find where he receives the ball and he's actually passing it forward to a McAtee, to a Bob, or Kevin De Bruyne instead. Let's see that. The other thing, I'm not mentioning Jack Grealish. Jack Grealish, I think, got start versus Aston Villa. Uh, People were saying he was playing a good game, but I watched that game live, and I did not think so at all. And he continues to be a little bit of a mix. He continues to kind of leave a lot to be desired, to say the least. So that is where Man City are, and it looks like they are going to have a big January for transfers. They've already been linked to a couple of defenders already, which they need. They're not playing with a whole lot of healthy defenders. They can't play in a high line anymore. Can't really pass either. So they need help elsewhere, everywhere. They've been linked to Ederson of Atalanta to maybe give them some kind of defensive protection or midfield protection, since Kovacic doesn't really fit that role. So we'll see. We'll see what they do. I don't know if Zubimendi is going to be in the cards for them or not. All of a sudden, Zubimendi to Real Madrid is starting to heat up. So we'll see how that ends as well. And then moving on, we'll go to Arsenal. Arsenal are now the team in second. So what did they do to get there? They destroyed Crystal Palace. They did it twice actually in kind of the same week. Jesus got a hat trick versus them, and what did Jesus do here? He got 2 goals here as well, with getting 1-0, and then Sarr, and then Jesus again, and then Havertz, and then Martinelli, and then Rice. And so the interesting thing to me though was, so Sarr makes it 1-1, and then I think it's Jesus is always kind of, for me, he's not necessarily in the box when you really want him to be, and here he was. He got a couple putbacks. Havertz was able to get on the end of one where I think it's a Jesus header, and it goes off kind of the post, or maybe it's a save, and Havertz is able to have a tap in. There's one where Martinelli has a great kind of gets to the byline with a great cross into the box, and then Martinelli also put one away. I think Rice had maybe a shot that was also, or a cross that found Martinelli for an easy kind of tap in, and then Rice actually had a really nice finish. So Rice with a goal, maybe an assist. Rice didn't start the game. So that is kind of the waiting to lead off with here. He started this benching Rice. He played, Thomas Partey, Havertz, and Odegaard in midfield. And again, you can see maybe that can be some faults. You can see that can maybe be a little bit vulnerable versus a different team. But here, Palace was trying to soak up pressure and trying to only counter. And for the most part, Arsenal have defenders that can play in a high line, even without Rice. You still have Saliba and Gabriel that can do that if they need to. And and the thing that I liked about here is when Jesus maybe was kind of running kind of more into midfield or trying to do link up. He always tries to run to find where the ball can find him. Havertz was then making runs into the box, so you still had someone that was there. Uh, and they were able to switch off a little bit. And Jesus, when he does get the ball into the box, does have a shot on him. He gets in the box. He can have a nice little dribble to get past people. And again, we were also seeing him being able to have a shot on him. And he's started to be a bagsman a little bit for them, and had a good game versus Brentford. So you see this versus Crystal Palace. And Crystal Palace were on a pretty good streak before that game, or before playing Arsenal twice now. And a lot of Arsenal fans were enjoying the moment, and then you get the Bukayo Saka news, uh, and again, it is struggling to say, because the worst thing to say about it is it was predictable to see coming. You just didn't know when, and you hope for the best, for Saka's sake, the player, because he's one of the better, more entertaining, young players in the league, and it's just he's been, even games when he hasn't necessarily been hurt, he's been either, being subbed, he's been limping. Anytime he's been fouled, he's apparently the number one most fouled player in the league, I believe, or it's him and Salah, like 1 and 2. Uh, he hasn't really been a whole lot of protection. He doesn't always get a lot of fouls to go his way, and he's always limping after games, anyways. And it's just he's had 2 or 3 seasons where he just hasn't had a rest at all. And so you just figured it was only a matter of time, and unfortunately, he did. And well, we'll see. I don't know what the actual grade is, but he had surgery already, so you don't want it to be torn, because unfortunately for him, that is an injury that can be very tricky to deal with the rest of your career if you don't manage it right. Just one player to highlight is Reece James, who hasn't been able uh, to withstand being able to play, since, a couple of games, since then, because you play in a couple of games and then it shows up again. So you don't hope that happens with this guy because he's special and he's still young. So hopefully Arsenal are able to, and you don't want Arsenal to force him back, even if they're in a title race, as you say. So Arsenal are going to have to do something maybe about that. We'll see if they do in January. Maybe Jesus coming back doesn't make them push for a striker. I do think they could probably maybe move for someone like a Victor Osimhen, or there's been talks about Victor Gilgrish of in Portugal. Ivan Toney still is in Saudi. Do you maybe go for him again? We'll see if they do something of that nature. I was thinking Marcus Rashford might be out there available. We're seeing Man United's sources trying to push him out. Apparently, he's already gotten offers from Saudi. He doesn't want to go to Saudi, but maybe if Arsenal come in and if he can lower the wages, maybe Rashford would be an idea. I don't necessarily know, uh, but so far they haven't. I don't want to say they haven't necessarily missed him, but it's going to be a different Arsenal team now that you can't just give the ball to Saka, ask him to beat two or three players to create something for you, or ask him to be on the end of a great finish. You don't really have that anymore. Martinelli can do stuff on the wing, on the right side or maybe the left side, but he's not going to be able to cut in and do something with his left foot. You're not going to have that anymore. I don't know if Ethan Wanyori can necessarily do that. So you're going to have a different dynamic a little bit more on that right side. So that is where we are for there. And then we get to the Ipswich Town game. They did win it 1-0. A pretty comfortable game for the most part. How would Arsenal be without Saka? And the answer was I put incomplete. Martinelli, tried. I didn't think he was terrible. But and again, he has a cross basically with his right foot, maybe something that Saka wouldn't have done. Um, and the cross just creates a little chaos, and I think it's Havertz that gets on the end of it. Ipswich, though, again offered not a much going forward, and the second half it was pretty comfortable. Arsenal were laying off and sitting back. Actually, again, Ipswich had majority of the ball, but they only had three shots to come from it, and really nothing troubled Raya. And then we get to the game yesterday versus Brentford, 1-0 with Mbeumo, just kind of a turnover here. I think it's Damsgaard. I think gets the ball, plays it to Mbeumo, and the Calafiori gets it started again. Maybe a little hesitant to close down. I think it allows Mbeumo space to get into the box. And then I think Mbeumo just taking the shot early surprises Raya near post. He also, I think it maybe surprised Gabriel. Gabriel maybe could have done better to run out to Mbeumo. So a couple people were fooled a little bit maybe by the early shot. That came against the run of play. 10 minutes or so, Arsenal just had the ball entirely in Brentford's area. You thought it was going to be bad. Brentford were sitting so far back and so far deep. You had Wiza and Mbeumo basically trying to defend just outside the penalty box. You didn't see any kind of way for them to actually get the ball advanced, and then they get the goal, and they went back to playing that way. And I think that was just inviting pressure, and we basically see that show up for the second goal. So and is not really the person you want to be getting the ball in his own penalty box. And ideally, you probably want him more upfield to be an outlet. So when you get the ball, you can just hoof it long, and Bremen would maybe fancy a sprint for Gabriel or someone. And instead, this is happening when Brentford have not had any of the ball at all outside of their area. So I think instead of Bremen getting the ball, just wanting to clear it and give it back to Arsenal, he wants to try to advance it himself. And what he does is he tries to basically dribble out of pressure, and he takes one too many heavy touches, and Arsenal win the ball back, and then Partey has a nice hit. Flecken saves that, but basically saves it right to Jesus, who's right there to head it in the rebound. Sepp Vandenberg maybe plays Jesus on sides and just doesn't react in time after the Partey shot. It is hard to really go at him for there, but Sepp Vandenberg did not have his best game. He was being pressed, and I don't think he's a left back or left center back. I think he has a right foot. And so, to me, I think he was struggling a little bit with his left foot. I think Arsenal were doing a good job to kind of press him into some errors, and he was just giving the ball away in the second half. Uh, and then, so that's where the first half ended. Arsenal with 65% of the ball. Brentford was hitting so deep, couldn't really advance it. And you get to the second half, you figured it was only going to be a matter of time, and you get the second one with Mikel Merino. Comes via a corner kick where Flecken's maybe trying to punch the ball and misses. There's so much chaos around him. It's hard for him to get near the ball, and then after basically a deflection, Arsenal find a finish. Arsenal get their patented goal off a corner kick. So Saliba, though, is like bear hugging or just kind of boxing him out, almost like a basketball move. where I have a buddy that's a Brentford fan, and he was wondering why is this illegal? Why is this legal still? I feel like that's probably a fair kind of a fair critique to say because the way that Saliba is getting so physical on the goalkeeper, he's restricting the movement, and I don't think you're allowed to restrict movement. No, you especially not if if you do that with an outfield player, it's a foul. Sometimes it's even a penalty. So I don't get why you can restrict the goalkeeper's movement to go punch the ball. I think there's a fair critique on that. Arsenal have found a way to kind of game that a little bit, but it doesn't matter because what Arsenal get a lot of these goals from really good delivery. It's been Saka, it's been Rice. I forget who actually sent the ball in here, but it was a really well delivered ball where Blecken really struggled to get on the end of it, and then Brentford couldn't clear it, and then Mikel Marino was able to get that in. And then Martinelli gets the third a couple minutes after that, where Ethan Wignore again feeds in a good ball from the right side. I think he's floating. I think he's floating something for Mikel Marino, who's made a good run into the box here. To me, Marino does this. I think I saw this versus Chelsea, where he makes well timed runs into the box. Now he's not the most athletic, to be honest. I think Arsenal fans been, kind of annoyed by that, but Marino does recognize when to make some runs into the box, and he is tall. He is a threat in there. So here it's forcing Brentford to commit numbers to try to defend that, and they are able to defend that. But the ball basically ricochets to Martinelli, who's completely unmarked, and he's able to find it in the far corner. That killed the game off. Brentford had more of the ball second half, but the damage was already done. Saw something similar with Ipswich for Arsenal. So Arsenal without Zaga had managed to be okay. And a couple of games in a row now, Rice hasn't always started for them. So that has been kind of the change. You got Calafiori back. Timber continues to play well. Martinelli, I think, has been good for them in a couple of games, plays on the left and right side. Also, Gabriel Jesus is starting to really show up for them as well. So we'll see what they do versus Brighton. They have a chance to, I think, close the gap to a 3-point lead before Liverpool play another game. So we'll see if they are able to do that or not. If not, then the other team chasing Liverpool is Nottingham Forest. And I don't think anyone would have been able to expect that to start the season. Certainly not me. I looked at where I had as far as little mini prediction for the first half of the year or for the end of the season. And I did not have Nottingham Forest in the top 10. I think I had Nottingham Forest just barely staying above relegation. So foolish on me. How did they get here? First, they had a 2-0 easy win versus Brentford. Ole Aina gets the first goal. Nico Williams cross. So you see one fullback on one side getting high up. He has a cross to the other side of the field that finds the other fullback or wingback. Not a lot of teams play this way. So Forest are playing that way. They're allowing the two fullbacks or wingbacks to get high up and actually play a role in their offense when they do counter. Forest are really good about doing that. They are playing a back three, but it's not always a back five. So you've got those players that can be defensive minded, but they're very good at making runs ahead with both of them. So you have license to, or you maybe even ordered to make these bombing runs upfield that can lead attacks the other way. And again, both are in the final third when the kill ball comes in, and then Anthony Alenga, keeper goes long, and misplay touch by Lewis Potter allows Alenga to win the ball in Brentford's penalty area, and then he's able to find his spot. Places it low and away from Flecken to find the corner. Forest, and then after you have the 2-goal lead, they're not a bad side at all. Playing route one direct football, but they're also not a bad side at just defending in a low block and getting results that way. They also have a really good keeper, Matt Sells, at his last resort as well. And then they turn around and beat Spurs, kind of a similar way. With Enlenga again, Spurs here lose the ball. Then Gibbs White is able to just carry it up 40 yards of field without anyone being able to close him down. Spurs are playing, I think it's Betancourt, and it's maybe Sarr. Sarr is played out, and then Betancourt goes to ground and misses. He did this versus Ipswich Town, from what I remember as well. And then you have a backline that is in retreat mode. Dragishin is just running backwards to his goal to save his life. You also have Archie Gray doing that as well. And I think that's maybe where you saw a little of the inexperience, because maybe if a Van de Ven or a Christian Romero is playing instead, someone who actually runs towards Anthony Alenga maybe allows one of the center backs to be 1v1 with Solanke, and you just take that risk. But instead, you just allowed Morgan Gibbs-White just a complete free roll all the way upfield, and then he's able to find in a pass to Anthony Alenga, splitting Archie Gray or splitting Destiny Udogi. And it's just too easy for Alenga to get in, and then he has a pretty nice slip finish to beat the keeper. Not the best return for either Brennan Johnson or Jed Spence. Returning to Nottingham Forest, where that's probably where most people learn their names because I think it was an FA Cup round where maybe they beat Arsenal or Nottingham Forest had a little kind of a heroic little FA Cup run when they were still a championship side, and that was when they still had Brennan Johnson and Jed Spence. So they returned to the Forest Stadium, and it didn't turn out to didn't have the best go of it. I guess you could say. I think Jed Spence even got sent off after this game. And then we get to the 2-0 game versus Everton. Wood, long ball to Wood, who heads it to Alenga, and then Alenga heads it back to Wood. Anthony Alenga has been at the heart of a lot of good things that Nottingham Forest have done over the last month, and he hasn't always been in and out of the. He hasn't always been a full time starter for them, whether or not it's been injury or something else. So he's been in and out of the squad. We've seen Jota Silva played there. We've seen some other people. I think they have Raymond Sosa that was playing maybe in one of the games. But here, Anthony Lenga has really good connection with Wood, and then basically Wood gets the ball, has a nice little 1-2, and then has a lovely floated flick, basically a volley over Pickford. Really wonderful finish, and that's kind of another thing too. You've got a true bagsman in Chris Wood, and that'll probably be something I say later on. Is this is reminding me a little bit of Leicester City and Vardy, where you're just seeing someone just come out of nowhere and to be a 20 goal scorer kind of striker. And when you're seeing when that happens, you can push up the table a lot. We saw that last season with we saw exactly that last season with Ollie Watkins and Aston Villa. It's not necessarily like for like, but I feel like it's very very similar in many respects. Chris Wood is obviously doing it a little bit differently than Ollie Watkins. Chris Wood isn't always making these runs into channels and beating people 1v1. But he's getting the ball on crosses, and he's doing an amazing job to always be a threat into the box. And here he's showing some lovely touch as well. And then we have Gibbs White with the second goal. Lovely move and finish here. This is a really nice, well worked goal here. First, they get to Corey, have a little bit of a heavy touch. Anthony Lenga runs quickly to the loose ball, plays it to Wood. Then Wood basically has Alenka kind of continues to run into the box. And basically, what that does is that drags Mikalenko to come with him, and so that creates a little opening because there's no one in the fullback spot now, and that allows Chris Wood to play in a through ball to Morgan Gibbs White, who then chops back as Decore is trying to recover, and Decore, because he's out of position, has to sprint a little bit here. And after Gibbs White chops past him, Decore can't stop his sprint in time. So clever by Gibbs White here, and then he's able to basically apply the finish. Really good skill and quick thinking by Morgan Gibbs White. And then again, that's a situation where Forrest had the 2-goal lead and don't give it up. Sean Dice outgunned at his own game, I guess you can say. Forrest was left with the ball, less shots, but again they scored 2, and that's all they needed to defend it. So it really is a throwback team in many respects. There's a lot of quality when they do get the ball and they do go forward. It's a team that defends a lot without the ball, but one thing they do is they are able to they have a lot of pace in their attack and they have good width. So you can play deep and they can defend, but they're also very very good at when they do want to counter. They're able to make a lot of runs forward, and they're able to get a lot of people actually in the box. They when they do attack, they do have numbers in their favor. So it's not necessarily like they do defend first, but they're not necessarily. I don't want to call them necessarily pragmatic or too defensive minded because when they do go forward, they do commit numbers forward, and Nuno does allow them to express himself a little bit. He allows someone like Hudson Odoi to have someone like a Nico Williams making an overlap run, or allows Ole Aina with Anthony Alenga, allows Morgan Gibbs White to have a little bit of freedom when he plays. Elliot Anderson when he plays. Nicholas Dominguez has a little freedom when he plays as well. You have Ryan Yates that kind of stays back, and then you have the three center backs. And the other thing about the three center backs that have come that usually play or not is you have Muriel and Milenkovic that are very good at timing challenges, whether or not it's closing danger before they gets to the box. Both are not afraid to play in a high line, or when they are sitting deep in a box, both are very good at cutting out crosses or passes that could lead to danger. And then you also have Matt Sells, who's a very good keeper when comes to a last resort. So I don't necessarily know if this is enough to get them to over the line to finish in a Champions League spot. I don't want to necessarily discount them though. Now that said, it was only a month ago where they did have a bit of a stretch where they did lose. quite handily. They lost to Man City pretty easily. They lost to Arsenal and lost to Newcastle. Now, you look in the table, that's not the worst teams to actually lose to, and you've already played them. So maybe there's something to say about that. And you do have Chris Wood, who's having again a Vardy like season. And Morgan Gibbs White has a lot of qualities to him. He can create and score in a number of ways as well. And they're not bad on set pieces either, with Milinkovic scoring in a couple of these. Before the winter break. So there's Forest are here. Whether or not they are going to, finish in the top four, they're going to finish in the top eight. I think you can say that. So that's not good for other teams that have been trying to fight for a Europa spot. That this is a team that was supposed to. This is a team that stayed alive for being relegated by the skin of their teeth last season. They did have an unfortunate, points deductions. Maybe they would have stayed up a little higher, anyways. But what a job that has come in. Nuno Espirito Santo has come in, and I think I already mentioned it last episode. This to me is my coach of the year, regardless of what Slot's done. Slot's had a pretty good team to do this with. I don't think anyone in the world would have been able to predict what Nuno has done with Nottingham Forest, and so. That is, I've already talked about that. I think I did that last week, so don't need to do that again. And then we'll get to Chelsea, and they're still not out of it, but Chelsea are now in fourth. I talked them up after their Brentford game. So what has happened here? So they go drawless or scoreless versus Everton. A couple of Jackson misses that were pretty big. No Marco Corella, he was suspended, so that hurt them a little bit. Keeper, Sanchez, their keeper, was maybe man of the match. So that kind of says where that game went. Everton had better chances that game. Ndoye and Decore had a number of looks kind of close to goal that maybe should have done better. Chelsea were not able to handle transitions against them, and they did have a couple. They did have some looks. And again, it comes to a point where you need your bagsmen to finish them. And Jackson, I think, had went up against a hot Pickford, but that's where that kind of shows up a little bit there. So, scoreless versus Everton, Arsenal did that as well. That's not the end of the world. Versus Fulham was really where the problem showed up. So they score the first goal with a wonderful individual goal by Cole Palmer. Takes a few people on, glides past him, places the ball into the net, beating Leno. But Chelsea in the second half were beating by wingbacks, by both Robinson and Castagna. So Chelsea have the lead, but they start to lose control of the game as we get into the second half. So and they start to look really vulnerable in defense. So what happens here is they start to really go after Levy Colwell. So Fulham get there are a couple of chances even before they get the first goal with Harry Wilson, where I think Anthony Robinson has actually played a ball into the box and maybe a better touch. He should have probably scored. So it's another big save by Sanchez. There are a number of looks though for that Iwobi was creating Adama Traore was playing at that point and was looking dangerous, but he was then subbed off for Harry Wilson, and Harry Wilson has been kind of a special sub off the bench for Fulham this season. He's been a little storyline for a lot of their season off the bench, and here he gets the tying goal. So Anthony Robinson here gets the ball played by Iwobi and then across into the box with his left foot. The ball it's just kind of a hopeful cross, and it doesn't really go anywhere when it goes to Castagna, who then plays the ball back to the other side of the kind of back post. I think he's doing a header here. So you have both fullbacks or wingbacks very high up in the opponent's end, and you don't have anyone on Chelsea, marking that. You don't have Neto marking that run on one side, and you don't have Jadon Sancho doing his defensive duties on the other side either. So Fulham are getting, or Chelsea are getting outnumbered by full. Chelsea's back four is getting outnumbered by Fulham's basically front five. And that's basically where they concede here. Colwell is playing a Harry Wilson offside or onside, so it's a nice little finish, a nice little headed finish, and then they get the second goal with Munoz, who also a sub that had since come on for Mikel Raul Jimenez. So it's two subs make the difference here. Sasa Lukic just runs past Enzo, and then it gets the ball from Castagna making a run upfield again, and then he has a great ball into the box that finds Munoz. Clever first touch, then allows him to get his shot off quickly because Sanchez does come out, but Sanchez it's not quickly enough, and so just like Liverpool, Fulham are able to make these runs upfield, aren't afraid of making, playing, a 50-50 cross into the box. Maybe it doesn't always come off. Maybe there is a little bit of risk of maybe you play it and maybe you lose the ball, but so it's not the most pretty, passing it, perfectly all the way upfield, but you're taking some risk and what you're doing is you're getting lots of runs, forward and you're creating an open game and Chelsea really did struggle with this. That second half Fulham were just they it felt like they almost nullified Chelsea's two wingers defensively. Uh, and what they also doing is felt like they, but because by playing those fullbacks so high up, you almost forced Neto and Sancho to do a lot of defensive work. So there were a few times when Jackson was getting the ball upfield, and he'd have no one around him. Even Cole Palmer wasn't making runs to be near him. Chelsea were just outnumbered and outrun, out hustled. So that was where you saw maybe the energy levels were starting to get to them a little bit. Jackson maybe could have done better with a couple finishes as well. Leno actually made a couple big saves. Cucurella had a header back post. Maybe he could have scored on. So that game easily could have ended 2-2, but it was just so 2 games in a row, Chelsea dropped points, and then the third was Ipswich, and this one was maybe the biggest surprise of them all, just because Ipswich did not look like they could do anything versus Arsenal just a couple of days ago, and here Delap, but when you look at the lineup, maybe you understand why. So here Delap, scores on a PK. Robert Sanchez, whether or not he was injured or benched, he's not necessarily the fault that they were dropping points. Now I've been saying that Sanchez is maybe a cudgel as far as the title goes, but that's because he's not really the best at his feet. But here, Jorgensen makes a mistake. So Sanchez benched, or maybe he was injured. Maybe that's why he didn't go. I didn't actually look into that. But Jorgensen comes in and basically catches Delap in the box, brings him down. It's a PK. Casado maybe could have done better because he allows basically a run to get in behind him. So it is kind of one of those. And then Hutchinson basically catches on a Axel Diazy mistake or a Diazy disaster, as I put in, as Delap's able to run onto a loose ball after a Diazy just really poor back pass. And then he's able to, Delap's able to hold on to it. He spins, plays, and Hutchinson in the box, who still has a lot to do here. Dances around a couple of players, and then he's able to find an opening slip to finish in past Jorgensen. Maybe Sanchez could have saved that, to be honest, because he does have a pretty good reach on him as well. And so the 2-0, and that's kind of all that Ipswich needed. Chelsea did not create a whole lot of damage even after going down. The surprising thing was you look at the start, or you look at the starting 11 here. It wasn't Jackson. It was Nkuku that played instead. So you lost any of that directness that maybe Jackson would have had. But then Jackson came on in the second half, and there was a moment when he was played in on goal. Maybe he was offsides, I forget, but he was played in on goal, and he missed it. I could have made it 2-1, maybe get back in it. And it's just Cole Palmer had a couple of nice hits, a couple of that maybe hit the bar or were close to it. But Cole Palmer to me has started to look a little bit leggy in a couple of these as well. A couple of these you're missing a couple key players. You're not having Roman Lavia for this stretch where he played versus the first half for Spurs. And then he was taken off at halftime. I thought it was for kind of a head issue. Apparently, he did something with his hamstring. And Caicedo and Enzo Fernandez, it's not that midfield has been kind of overrun a little bit. Cole Palmer isn't really helping out defensively. So you're seeing how there are gaps that are now kind of showing up a little bit. Lovely Colwell is very good with the ball at his feet, not really the best defensively. You're seeing that showing up a little bit. So what has happened here? It is basically some of that. Versus Ipswich, Pickford had a pretty good day, and Evan Zadaye, gave them fits. Versus Fulham, Leno also as well had a pretty good showing, but Ipswich was the one that where you look at, it's hard to explain. So Cole Palmer again looking gassed. I think that's starting to show up, and he's Louis Lyons. He's kind of the guy that makes all of their offense work. They're not direct enough, and that could maybe be an issue of them kind of losing their energy a little bit. Jadon Sancho isn't ever looking to make a run in behind a fullback. He's always asking ball to feet, and he gets it. And he doesn't always have Cucurella making a run overlapping him. Sometimes Cucurella is making a run inside him. But that doesn't really take away the fullback. So you're asking Jadon Sancho to beat someone 1v1, and you're asking him to do it without any kind of pace or any kind of athleticism. really. Jadon Sancho can be brilliant when someone's pressing him, like Spurs were doing, and that's why Jadon Sancho looked really good in that Spurs game. But when someone is kind of sitting in, and Timothy Castagna had no issues taking on Jadon Sancho. Someone like a Seamus Coleman or Ashley Young had no issues taking on Jadon Sancho. So that's when you start to see the problems, in my opinion. In a couple of these, Neto was played instead of Madueke. Madueke was very good in that game versus Brentford, but I think Madueke actually started in the Ipswich game, and he didn't really do anything either. There's a very weird kind of there needs to be a little bit of uh, a nice little middle where sometimes Madueke is the only one that actually tries to take on his man, but he doesn't always look to play in Jackson. It doesn't look to play in people. He always looks to get a shot off. Now it's good to have a winger that is direct. Sometimes he's a little bit too direct. Neto has been playing in some of these instead, and Neto hasn't been good defensively. He hasn't been tracking his runner. I don't necessarily know if Madueke does either. Neto does have some end product on him, but it doesn't feel like it's very consistent. Like that's kind of the other thing too. Neto, Sancho, and Madueke are very inconsistent, and that's kind of showing up a little bit as well. Nicholas Jackson with a couple key misses versus West Ham or with Everton versus Fulham, and I think you're seeing the limits of relying on Jackson to kind of just be the lone guy in the box. You don't have anyone really joining him. Uh, and it is very weird to say how I feel like I'm a little bit of a hypocrite because I was talking this Chelsea team up after they looked as good as they did versus Brentford, but Brentford maybe helped them out, thinking about it, thinking back at it, but by playing so deep, because Arsenal just kind of did the same thing versus Brentford, to be honest. So last episode has egg on my face a little bit here. I still think Chelsea are going to be, you know, I don't necessarily, I never really bought them as title chasing. Uh, Chelsea feels like though they are better set to at least stay in a Champions League spot. We'll see if Man City are able to get back in it. But that said, if Newcastle are able to bring in a defender, if Newcastle are able to bring in get Finn Botman back, I think Newcastle could actually push this Chelsea side and maybe overtake them. They're only a couple of points away as is, so that's not that big of a prediction. Newcastle to me are more reliable. Ishak is more reliable. Gordon to me is more reliable. Um, I think Cole Palmer is maybe I'm not Cole Palmer. I think that midfield three is maybe more reliable than what we've seen from Chelsea as well. So that is kind of you can't even look at defensively. There've been a couple of times when Chelsea have been good defensively, but Colwell to me is kind of uh, he's kind of I don't necessarily say the mark, but you look at him as kind of one where you can maybe get him a little bit defensively. In this game, I think Marlo Guster was rested because he's been overplayed. So you played Axel Diazzi, and Axel Diazzi has a disaster of a back pass, and it feels like Axel Diazzi just has no room to really fit in this Chelsea team. There's been talks that Reece James is close to returning. I think he actually even made the bench. Didn't get any game time, but I think he made the bench. So maybe you can have him, back in the squad for the second half of the season. That could maybe help them out a little bit. They haven't had Batashile. They haven't had Wesley Fofana able to play. So they've been playing Tosin Adebayo, one of the center backs for them. And I don't necessarily think he's really. A lot of people have been looking at him as kind of the issue. Uh, I don't necessarily think he necessarily helps them as far as pushing to win every game or not. But I don't really think he's the reason why they've been conceding a lot of these chances. So I don't know how much I really buy that in this game. I think the keeper maybe was at fault for a couple of these mess ups as well. So it's just you're seeing a team that they've said it's the youngest in the league. You really do see that now. They've maybe overperformed expectations, you can say. Maresca, first year in charge as well. Maybe he's overperformed a little bit to this point. We'll see if they're able to respond versus I think it's Crystal Palace that they have on the weekend. So we'll see. We'll see there. I do think they need a little more help. They need Nkuku to actually get going for them. He's a good player. And I don't know if it's because Cole Palmer's kind of taken up that number 10 role. Maybe instead of playing Nkuku for Jackson, maybe take out Cole Palmer, give him a little rest, and play Nkuku and Jackson together. I don't know. Maybe that's too radical of an idea. Anyways, that's kind of where we are here. The other one is Yao Felix. Yao Felix played versus Ipswich. Yao Felix actually didn't have a terrible game, but he also didn't. He's another player that's very ball to feet. He can create a little bit, but who is he going to create for? That's kind of the issue that you have with him as well. And again, the last thing to say is versus Brentford, they had something like 20 crosses in the first opening minutes or opening 30 minutes or opening first half. And you've seen them, the crosses kind of stop a little bit for them. Enzo likes having control of the ball. You hear him talk about that a whole lot. Sometimes you need to take a risk, and maybe he'll get back to that or not. We'll see. And that is where we are. We're for the festive fixture list. Sorry for being away a little bit there. I'll try to get back to normal operations this past after this past week, and probably try to do a show Tuesday or Wednesday. And so until then, you stay squatting and stop recording.